Welcome back, everybody. My name is Kareen Mills, and I'm your podcast host. This is the Being Mother Hustler podcast. I'm super excited today because I met this lady through another podcast. She was listening to me as a guest through another podcast, my friend Lance Isios. And something about my podcast resonated with her because of her journey and the story that she's about to embark here, telling us about it in the next hour. So I would love to give you a warm welcome, Renee. Thank you so much for showing up today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. So I'm just going to dive deep directly into your childhood because this is what I thrive with. I love listening to people's childhood because it is a massive contribution to who we become as an adult. So I'll have you take it away. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to be listening and absorbing everything. And throughout this process, come up with some questions for you.
All right, that sounds good. So we'll start by just, my name. I'm Renee Honrada, and I live in northern Idaho. I live in a small town called Coeur d'Alene, but I didn't grow up here. And so I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I don't know if you're familiar with Albuquerque at all or if you've ever been there, but it's a pretty large city. And I, spent my whole childhood growing up in Albuquerque. And from the time that I was little until about high school, I lived in the downtown part of Albuquerque, which was a really lots of gangs, a poor neighborhood. I mean, we were very poor, as a family. And I was raised by my mom and my grandmother and my two uncles. And so didn't have, the traditional mom and dad type family. I'm raised with a single mom. My mom was 18 years old when she had me. So of course she needed help from my grandmother. Right. And my dad, unfortunately, made some bad choices. He was in prison when I was born. And, the result of his choices really shaped who I ended up becoming and who I am now. He was addicted to heroin. And so he had his own journey through addiction that he was dealing with and ended up landing himself, in prison as a result. And so my mom trying to raise me in this crazy gang neighborhood as a young mother. Yeah. And she grew up in the same neighborhood. And so she knew what it was like to be growing up in that type of neighborhood. She had me go to school in a different part of town when I was in my middle school years because she didn't want me growing up with all of the, I don't know, I guess you could say all of the troubles that she had when she was little. I grew up in the same house that she grew up in, And so it was a really interesting way for her to decide to parent me by having me go to school in a different part of town, because then that shaped who I became. And what ended up happening was I made friends with all these kids that were into new wave music and wearing all black and kind of punk rock, that was the type of kids that I landed with. And then after a short period of time, in my middle school years, I was causing too much trouble in school. I was ditching school. I was doing things I shouldn't be doing. And they kicked me out. And they were like, okay, you're going to have to go to school in your own school district, right? So then I had to go to school. And then I had to start going to school with all of the people that I lived with in my neighborhood, but I wasn't friends with any of them. I was way different. I had my head shaved. I wore black. I wore black makeup. And I was going to school with a bunch of kids who were in gangs and in a whole different way of living, as far as their style than me. And so that was a really interesting journey, being the only kind of punk rock kid in a school that was 100% Mexican gangs.
Wow. It's funny because you ended up in the school your mom protected you from.
Yes, exactly.
And how or what thoughts as a I don't know, were you elementary, high school?
Middle school. So I was like 13, 12, 13,
Oh
14
man, that's a
at that
tough
time.
age too, because that's when the
Yeah.
development is just going crazy. You're confused. I have one middle schooler right now, and I mean, they just go through mood swings, and it's a lot of internal battle, I could suppose, that's going through. And then what you're going through moving from one school to another and not having friends in the neighborhood that you should have been going to school for. What was
Mhm.
going through your mind as a child?
It was really hard. And because I was not only like battling that type of situation, but also battling like the lack of a parent. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have my dad. And when I was younger, um, like 5, 6, and 7, we were
Mm-hmm.
driving to the prison every weekend to go see my dad. So he was still
Wow.
very much like part of my life as a younger child. And even though he wasn't in my life on a daily basis. But so I was dealing with that too. And I landed in a deep state of depression as a very young child.
Wow.
Um, so that's, things got really heavy. Like when I turned 12, 13, 14, those were some of the hardest years of my whole entire life.
Wow.
And you couldn't pay me all the money in the world to go back to being that age and going through that
Why
stuff,
do you think why do you think that it went dark around those age for you? Do you think that maybe you finally understood where your father was and that he could never be with you to father you?
I
Or do you
definitely
think
understood where he was. And
Mhm.
I blame it, like, it's weird. I blamed my mom for all of my problems because she was the one parenting me. So
Mhm.
naturally she's the one I'm going to blame for everything. And like somehow my dad was like a hero in my eyes, even though he was locked up, because
Wow.
he was like caring and understanding, and he was trying to treat me, he wasn't parenting me, he was trying to understand me, where my
Mhm.
mom was parenting me and not trying to understand me. So
Yeah,
I had this kind of special relationship with my dad.
that is very that's actually really interesting now that I'm listening to both sides, from your dad being locked up and your mom being free. But I feel like your mom, and you correct me if I'm wrong, your mom was actually, I think, protecting you from going down the rabbit hole that your dad went.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very different perspective. And I think that your dad was not protecting you, but was empowering you by understanding who you were and what you were, like decisions. You could probably have a lot of deep conversations with them, because sometimes when we have very little time with people, we tend to go deep very fast in our
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And so it's a lot more of an understanding journey with your dad versus parenting, only because I think he probably come from that, no freedom place, and just empowering you to hopefully you make the right decisions for yourself without him being out there,
Yeah.
and not end up being him in, it's, I totally understand both sides, and it's super amazing that you're like explaining this and it just clicked in my mind. So
It was
wow.
definitely interesting. And one of the cool things was, though, is that even though he was locked up, I was still part of his family. So so my dad's family all lived in California in the Los Angeles area. So I would spend every summer with my dad's family from the
Wow.
time I was 5 until the time I was like 17.
Mhm.
And so even though he wasn't part of it, I was still part of that side of the family. And so it's a really like kind of interesting situation, because even to this day he's not in prison anymore, but
Mhm.
he's still not able to be like part of his family even, but I am. It's kind of
Wow.
weird. Yeah.
Wow.
um so let's see what else happened at that time.
So so
I
so when you came through this dark time in your life, 12, 13, 14, what happened on the other side?
well um kind of what happened before I came out the other side was I actually tried to commit suicide when I was a
Mm.
teenager.
Mhm.
I was 13 years old, and I was just desperately unhappy and depressed. And I went through a period of like cutting. I cut myself, and I just, my mom's not, I love my mom. Let's back up. I love my mom. She is one of the strongest people that I know, but I didn't know that then.
I never do.
Right? We don't. And I have
Mm.
3 kids, and I get it. Like, my kids see me and I don't know what they think, and that's their journey, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, I didn't know or understand my mom, and we weren't close. She was not affectionate. She didn't spend like time with me.
Mhm.
She was young. She was young and trying to figure out her own life.
Were you the
But
only child?
yeah, at the time I was the only child at the time.
Mm.
And no, my brother was born by then. So I have a brother. He's 11 years younger than me. So he was born when I was 11. So yes, my brother was in the picture by that point. But I took Valium. They were my
Mm.
mom's Valium. I found them and I took Valium, and I came very, very close to losing my life that night. But my grandmother found me, and
Mm.
she took me to the hospital, and they pumped my stomach. And from there, it just turned into me being even more like heavily restricted. I had to go to counseling. I had to go to group counseling, like all these things. But I was still wild. I
Mm.
figured out how to run away from home. Like I did so many things that if my kids did those things to me, I would be like so scared. I
I know.
would be so scared, and I hurt my mom so much. And that's part of what
Mm.
I'm reconciling with now as an adult, I think, is realizing how much I put her through.
Mhm.
And we've never really, we talk about it a little bit, but
Mhm.
we haven't had that like come to Jesus about it yet,
Yeah.
which I think we will, you know.
Wow.
But
You're
you know,
healing.
I did come out the other end. It took a while,
Mhm.
probably a couple more years of learning and figuring things out, and being angry.
Mhm.
But by the time I started high school, my mom had ended up, we moved to a different neighborhood. So we moved uptown to the side of town that she like had tried to, you know, have me go to school at and stuff like that. Cause she worked on that side of town. She worked for the Veterans Administration Hospital. And so it was up on that side of town. And she had an accident that gave her a settlement, allowed
Mm.
her to buy a home. So
Wow.
like a disaster turned into a blessing. She was able to buy a home. We moved. And that's, I think, really when my life shifted as a teenager, because I made new friends, had a kind of like a new start, new
Wow.
high school. And it just kind of went from there. But
Wow. What can you advise, number one, children that are going through what you went through? Advice, maybe even tips. Um,
mm,
and do you think counseling is the answer?
um, you know, counseling for me at that time, it wasn't necessarily the answer, because I was angry.
Mm.
I think I was angry, but I didn't know why I was angry. And I think if my mom had maybe tried to, I don't feel like she tried to understand me very much. I think she tried to just push it
Protect.
off, like maybe push it off for somebody else to fix the problem.
Mm.
So I think the level of involvement as a parent makes a huge difference. I really
Wow.
do. I mean, some parents don't have either the emotional capacity or the time to be like heavily involved in their children's lives, and some parents do. And so I think there's got to be a difference there. I don't know. I only know my own experience, you know. And I think that I had a very like absentee mom, and then I
Yeah.
had no dad, you know.
Right.
I was kind of raising myself.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And what, you're a parent now and you're a mom,
I
right?
am.
What can you advise, or the advice that you take that you advise other people as
uh,
to, and you talk about engagement a lot, and I'm all about engagement, because I think when we're engaged as a parent, not just a mom, it really do change the game for our children.
yes.
So what is that advice
Yes.
that you would take for yourself, as well as you would leave our audience to really hopefully start doing if they're not already doing?
I would say that depending on the age of your children, so starting young. So my children are 11, 17, and 21.
Wow.
And My 21-year-old, I don't know what I did, but I did something right. She turned out to be very independent, very strong. She moved out of the house like right after she graduated from high school, like of her own choice.
Wow.
She has a good work ethic. So somehow her dad and I did that really well. We still wonder, we're like, what did we do? How did we do that? Because we were very young when we had her.
She sounds like you, strong, independent.
Yes, she is. So somehow that landed with her. My 17-year-old, he's my angry child. He's my trying to figure out where he fits into the world. And so that's the one that I have a lot of potential to help and learn and teach. He's kind of the reflection of me in a softer way, if that makes sense. Because where I'm bringing him up, where I'm raising him, is so different from where I was raised. And I'm trying to make a lot of different choices than what my mom made, even though I'm a single parent as well. But so staying close to what's going on with them, asking them what's going on with them, being there to listen without judgment, I think is huge.
Huge. Yes, I agree.
You know, and then for my 11-year-old, he's a very young 11-year-old, if that makes sense. He's still very innocent, and he doesn't have a lot of adversity in his life at all. Like his life is very easy in comparison to what my life was like at his age. And so I have him keep a gratitude journal. My 17-year-old doesn't want to jump on the bandwagon with the gratitude journal, but my 11-year-old, I'm trying to capture him young, you know? So we have gratitude. We talk about gratitude a lot. We talk about how we treat people. We talk about kindness. We talk about compassion. So things like that, you know, just kind of planting those seeds into his young mind, his young, very impressionable mind, so that he can be more aware.
Yeah, you should have, once he hits like 11, you said 11, maybe like 12, 13, and he can read chapter books. As soon as he can read chapter books, I give him the personal development books that I read or have read, and I give him a reward in the end, but without the mastermind in the end, they don't get a reward. So we have to sit down and talk about what, you know, their takeaways are, because that way and you know, prior to reading, I tell them, these are the things that I want you to come up with as you're reading the book. That way they know what to grab and still get the reward. So I am very transparent with them that I'd like to have a discussion about it after, and I won't give them, I give them $20 after we talk about it. So that's a good $20 bill.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
You know, like Think and Grow Rich, they like subconsciously, and it's weird because some of these things they're doing in their lives, it didn't even come up in like the mastermind / conversation with them after they read the book, but somehow their subconscious mind figured out a way to work into their lives without having like a conscious, like this was my takeaway 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Because they read it and they absorbed the content and the information, and somehow like the things or the philosophies that they learn in those books, they apply it in school. They apply it in their relationship with their friends. They apply it with me, and I'm like, wow, but Mom, you can't quit. You know, you have to keep going, because that's what successful people do. You know, I'm like, oh, that was Think and Grow Rich philosophy, but it just like shows up out of nowhere. But because I have them read those Slide Edge philosophy, the Slide Edge book, which is, you know, the power of compounding, whether it's interest in your investment, or it could be compounding of working out every day for 1 hour, and then over time you'll eventually get to your goal. But not like being impatient with the result, because the result will come if you keep doing it every day. But it's been such an amazing practice that I've incorporated into my parenting, and so that I'm partially parenting them and partially the book is helping me out because it's third party. So yeah,
I like that.
You know, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say that I think that even through conversations and modeling, really like modeling the behavior that you want to see in your children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they pick up on all those subtle cues that we give,
For
even if
sure.
it's not direct communication. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm trying to do with my older one, is that just like modeling the behavior so that he can subtly pick up the information and then do that himself, because he's not going to, he doesn't want to do yoga with me or like meditate or anything like that. So I have to figure out ways to like sort of put it out there for him to grasp. And I've seen him and heard him say things that I might have said to someone else, or, he'll come to me and be like, oh, I had this thought. And then he'll spit out some wisdom. And I'm like,
Wow.
yep, I know where that came from. So,
Doesn't that make
yeah,
you proud though?
it
Because
does. It really does.
I mean, they gravitate to the things we do and show them, and they don't gravitate to the things that we tell them. And so,
Yeah.
if so I'm super careful now of what I tell them to do. I have to really process it in my mind, like, okay, I'm about to ask my children this. Have I shown them enough, and model them to them enough that
Yeah.
I too, I'm willing to do what I'm about to ask them. So it's very consensuous type of demand. It's not just a pure flat out, authoritative demand.
Right.
It's more of
Right.
like, okay, do I do this in my own life?
Right. It's like kind of that concept of like when you have employees, a good boss doesn't ask an employee to do anything that they wouldn't do themselves. Yeah.
Exactly. Business and a family unit is very parallel to me, because we have, and I always say this, we have a mission and a vision in a company, because when the company is falling apart, we go home to those mission and vision. When the company is just not quite doing well, we go home and we remember why we exist. And so we've created a family mission and vision, and it's improved the quality of my relationship with my husband,
Mm-hmm.
because marriage, as you know, isn't perfect, and any relationship isn't perfect, and there are a lot of arguments that occur in my relationship with my husband. We never have like a blowout fight, because when it gets to feel like it's starting to be severe, we go home to our mission and vision and say, okay, look, we need to go back home to the mission and vision. And that way we don't go into this black hole of feeling very mad about each other because we didn't get what we want, and that we both have the same direction. That's why we do what we do every day. And so, and my kids know that, and they they contribute to that mission and vision by doing whatever it is their part of the whole unit is, because we don't become a unit without them doing it. And I'm very vulnerable with my kids, like, look, I can't do this without you.
Mm-hmm.
I know you think I'm great and I can multitask several things, but there's certain things you must do for it all to work. So
Yeah. I operate the same way. I'm very transparent with my kids. I don't expect my kids to like hold space for my emotions necessarily, but I am transparent with them when I am emotional, so that they understand that I might be going through something, or I'm transparent with them about, what's going on in my outer life that might affect my behavior at home, or, things like that. And I let them see me vulnerable so that they know that it's also okay to be vulnerable when the time is right.
yeah, it's true. That's very
Yeah.
true.
You know,
So
one of the big reasons I wanted to come on and talk with you is because my story's so long, and but I really want to talk about what I went through in my last marriage.
let's do
And
it.
so I'm going to give you a really super condensed version so we can get there. When I was 19 years old, I left Albuquerque and I moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, with my first husband, who's the father of my daughter.
Beautiful there.
My two sons so my kids all have different dads. And that's one of the unique things about me as a mom, is that my three kids are all with three different men. And so they each have had their own journey, with the parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And after my last son was born and his dad and I split up, I met someone who I then ended up marrying. And this was back in 2010. I met this person and I married him. He was seemed like the most awesome guy. He was a coach. He had 3 kids of his own. He was divorced. It kind of seemed like all the stars aligned, right? I had 3 kids. I had been divorced once before. And we seemed to have a lot in common, yet he was very different from anyone I had ever been with. Mm. And I quickly fell in love with this person, and we decided within about the space of just under 2 years, we got married after being together for about 1.5 years. I moved in with him and we got married. And I started to kind of feel like I was suffocating a little bit in that marriage, and I didn't know or understand why. Mm-hmm. And as time went on, he became very controlling, and I started noticing this, and I started noticing that I was scared a lot at home. And then our relationship took kind of like it kind of went dark. We had a dark side to our relationship that included physical abuse between the both of us. Mm-hmm. And as much as I want to, make myself to be super innocent in everything, I'm not.
And thank you for that.
I'm not innocent in that, because I too used my hands on him, but so as to defend myself, mm-hmm. And not only was he physically abusive, but he was emotionally and verbally abusive. And that's really where it started, was with all of that. But I had never been with anybody like that. So I didn't know what the signs were of emotional abuse. Mm-hmm. But I really started to feel and see in our family dynamic that he controlled everything. Wow. And I was working full time. I was a manager. I'm a retail manager, so I used to work at a different retailer than I do now. But I was working 50 hours a week, and we had 6 kids combined, and we had a crazy schedule because his kids were in sports. And so we were always at football, basketball, or baseball, every weekend, tournaments out of town.
All Coeur d'Alene now.
Yeah, Coeur d'Alene. Okay. And so still in Northern Idaho. So I moved here in 19, and I've never lived anywhere else. So I've lived in Coeur d'Alene for 22 years. And so, let's see, we were together for just about 6 years, if you count the time that we were separated. But in the thick of our marriage, there was a lot of that abuse happening. And I showed up to work hurt, bruised. I showed up to work with a broken hand, a broken wrist, things like that. And it took a long time for me to want to leave enough, because I loved him, mm-hmm. but I could see what was happening. Mm-hmm. But I loved him. And then I could see how my kids were being affected. I could see how his kids were being affected. And I was isolated from my friends. I was isolated from my family, because remember, my family all lives in 2 different states. Uh-huh. So the only real family I had and have is my children. Uh-huh. And so we're all living under this roof of behind closed doors, what feels to be kind of dark. Mm. He controlled everything down to what I wore, how I presented myself. And not that he would tell me what to wear or what to do, but if I did something like curl my hair, he would say why are you curling your hair? Who are you dressing up for? That kind of stuff. It was things like that. And so I really molded myself around him and did everything to not upset him. Mm-hmm. And when I started to realize that was my life, I also sunk back into depression. And I've dealt with depression my whole life, and I've been on medication. And so I was back on depression medication, and I was real deep in depression. And I even had those thoughts of suicide again at that time.
Wow. I was going to say, how was that parallel to your 12, 13, 14?
Yeah, it was Definitely the depression was there. Definitely the thoughts of like not being good enough, not living up to someone's standards. Like that's what that felt like. And I didn't know what narcissism was. I wouldn't have been able to define it or to see the signs in another person at that time until I started digging and started like questioning why I was feeling how I was feeling. And not only was he abusive physically towards me, but he was physically abusive with my older son, my 17-year-old, who at the time was 11, 12, at that time. And he was verbally abusive to everyone in the house and physically abusive with his son.
Wow.
And I witnessed all of this, and we all witnessed all of the abuse that was happening in our household. But our kids, they're kids, right? What are they going to do? We're the parents. We're the ones that are supposed to be protecting them.
Hold on 1 second. So He was abusive to your 17. That was then 11. Now, you told me that your 17-year-old is the angry one.
Yeah.
You think there is a correlation to that abuse? Okay.
Yeah. In fact, we had a conversation about that last week. He was very angry and he's having difficulty at school. And we had a conversation in the evening after school. And he was just like, I'm angry and I'm tired of people picking on me and I'm not going to let anybody pick on me anymore. And he brought up my ex-husband, I know that that's part of his anger. There's a lot more, underlying stuff that has to do with his own father and his father's poor choices and his father's lack of presence in his life. But the father figure that I chose for him ended up being someone that harmed him. Now, that's a lot of guilt to carry around as a parent.
Yes.
I'm still trying to unravel that and trying to, again, transparency with my kids, right? After we left, there was just one night. It was a normal night at home. We were watching TV. Our kids were downstairs. It was, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And I could hear some bickering downstairs. And so I went down there to find out what was going on. And my youngest, who at the time was like 6, maybe something like that. My husband's older girls were teasing my youngest and he was not having it. He was upset. And that's what the bickering was that I heard. And I went down there and my husband came down after me to find out what was going on. And he belittled me in front of the kids. He yelled and screamed at me in front of the kids, which was normal. Like that was normal behavior in our house. That was part of the dynamics in our household, was that I was treated like one of the kids. And we used to argue about that, like, hey, I'm not your child, I'm your partner, and that was a difficult thing for him to wrap his mind around, I guess. But that night was the last night that anything went down, and it did get physical that night in our bedroom behind closed doors, and our kids could hear everything. But that was the last night that he laid hands on me, and that was the last night I allowed him to treat me that way.
Wow.
And I had to make that decision that night that I'm done here. I'm done. You're not going to do this to me anymore, And I didn't leave right then and there. I told him basically like the next day, I'm out. I got to find a way out of this. I want out. I want to move out. I intend to move out and move on with my life. And so it took about a month because I had to find a place to live, kind of get all my ducks in a row to move. And by the time that month was over, that was one of the hardest months of my life. Also living in a house with somebody who I once loved, still in some weird twisted way, still love, right? He's my husband. The layers of abuse are so hard to unravel and unpack. And I know that women ask all the time, like, why did you stay? Always, right? Why did you stay? And it's because there's a love that you think you can either fix a person or help a person or whatever, because you can see the innate goodness in somebody, that we all have goodness inside of us. But there's a shadow side to everybody also, right? And some people's shadow is just darker than others.
You heard my story. I asked that of my mother.
Yeah.
all the time when I was growing up. But, like you, there's that love and hope of the person that you used to love to show up again,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
so you want to wait for that person again to show up. And, it's my mom is still married to my dad. And I mean, they've gotten better and they have fights, but it's definitely gotten better as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
But to sustain that kind of, situation is just beyond me. But like you said, you also have like talking to you, I understand why. I now understand why because I'm older and I can understand every person's perspective. And there's no such thing as failure. There's only perspective of what we know based on
Yeah.
our experience. And like you didn't even know what a narcissism was.
No
So,
clue. Never lived, never been with anyone like that. Never even had like a friendship that felt that way or anything that felt that way, you know. My mom could see it, and she questioned it a little bit the couple of times prior to when I actually did leave, that I wanted to leave. She was cheering me on, like, yes, this is a good decision for you to go. And then I changed my mind and backed out. I'm like, no, 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 I'm not going to leave. I'm going to stay. I'm going to work it out. So my mom could see, and she had been through it with one of her best friends, helping her best friend come out of an abusive relationship. And I knew all of that, but I think I buried it, because I remember when my mom was helping her friend go through that, but I buried it. I didn't understand it. I was kind of a kid back then. But when so I did leave, and we tried to quote unquote, work it out,
yeah.
living separately. So I kind of had like a methodical way that I did this. Because at first it was just, I want to leave and I want nothing to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
But then the heartstrings are being pulled because I'm still living with him for like a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's sleeping on the couch. I'm sleeping in the bed. Like, we're not sleeping in the same bed. We're hardly even talking to each other. I'm staying out of the house for as long as I can after work until I could come home.
Wow.
Like, if my kids weren't with us that night, I would stay gone until like 9 o'clock at night, just to not be at home with him. And we got through that month, but so by the time I moved out, we decided that we were going to live separately, not involve our kids in our relationship anymore. We were going to separate the kids out of our relationship and just try to work on he and I as a couple, outside of the kids, right? So that was what we decided. And so I found a place, and we were, seeing each other outside of the kids. We weren't bringing the kids into anything, but we would go we'd go to dinner on Friday nights and things like that. And that lasted for a few months. And I knew though that I wanted to pull back all the way, but I was scared still to say it. Because I also know that a person like him needs to be in control. They need to kind of have the last and final word. And so partially for my own safety, I think, now that I look back on it, I think I just tried to allow the natural course of things to more seem like it was his idea if we were going to split up. Does that make sense? So rather than me coming out, and in some ways I feel like I was a coward, and in other ways I feel like I was protecting myself and my kids. And so I look at that like, okay, what side of me was really showing there? Was I being a coward by not saying, or was I being smart by kind of continuing to distance myself until finally by Valentine's Day? So I had left in July. By that following February, he came to me and he said, I don't love you anymore and I want a divorce. And my insides were like jumping for joy. I was
fireworks.
Yes. I mean, I was like, okay. And I turned around, and because I had gone to his house, we were going to go on a date that night. And I showed up, and he just looked me in the eyes and he said, I don't love you anymore. And I don't want to do this anymore. And I stayed calm, cool, and collected, on the outside, but inside I was like, yes, 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 finally I can be free. And I didn't express any of that because then I think it would have triggered a response from him, the negative response.
I agree.
But I kind of hightailed it out of there and drove away going, hallelujah, Hallelujah.
Wow.
And we did. So we like amicably divorced. We had no
That's good.
property together because he was so controlling. We didn't have bank account together. We didn't have property together. We had nothing together because of how controlling he was. So it made our split very easy.
Wow.
I am very blessed in that manner that
Yeah,
a lot of women don't have that luxury of being able to leave their abuser and have it be such a clean break,
exactly.
you
But
know?
you were very strategic about it too.
Yeah,
Because like I think you figured him out.
I
And
did.
by figuring him out, you did what would make him feel like he's still winning.
Yeah.
Even though the I mean, in reality, you're the one that's when you figure out someone and you can play their game, you're the freaking winner.
Right? Totally. That's totally it. Like, and my kids are watching all this go down, and my daughter at the time was a senior in high school. So this was her senior year of high school that we were living away from him, and he and I were, the working it out and all that crap. But we wrote up our divorce papers together and we filed it. And
Good.
I kid you not, the day that we went and signed our divorce papers for it to be final, he walked me out to my car from the courthouse. He met my best friend of 20 years for the first time that day. That day. So that's how isolated I was from my friends. I had a friend who had helped me raise my kids that he had never met the whole time we were married because he isolated me from my friends that much.
Wow.
He met her that day because she worked at the courthouse. She was the one who took our paperwork from us behind the counter. It was just
Wow.
such a weird way for that to happen. But we walked out to the car and he told me that he wanted to be with me. He just didn't want to be married to me anymore. And I was
Yeah.
just like,
No.
no, no, that's
There
not how
goes the
this is.
control again.
Exactly. And I had to just play him. And I was like, yeah, maybe someday, but not now. Like, this isn't it. Like, I think this is the best choice for us.
Good.
And after all of that, I ended up buying my own house, which I never thought I was going to do.
Oh my gosh, good for
And
you, girl.
I, I, I was trying to find something to work through my healing. And that's when I found my essential oils and my yoga. It just it found me, I guess you could say.
No, you were ready to receive it.
Yeah, I was really ready to receive
Mhm.
it. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of the space that I've landed in is essential oils. I started practicing yoga every single day, and I was feeling really proud and encouraged and strong and all of these things. And then I realized very quickly that I needed to share that with people.
Mhm.
And I took a yoga teacher training, and now I'm a yoga teacher. And
Yes.
so
I'm
now I
so proud
share
of you.
now I share yoga and oils with people who are
You should have seen your face when you said that. You'll see it on your YouTube.
ready. I will. Like right now, like today, I've been preparing for a class that I'm going to be giving tonight with two of my very good friends, and we've started this kind of collective healing thing that we're doing. So that's my journey now, is just to bring the awareness to people that they can heal through their pain.
Mhm.
We have to lean into it, though. That's the thing,
You do.
is that if we try to bypass all of the pain, then we're just bypassing, right? You know that term,
Yes.
spiritual bypassing.
Yeah, you suppress your pain. It never goes away.
It
The more
doesn't.
you allow it to surface, it's kind of like the smoke. When you open the lid, the smoke comes out. It's like a smoke that you've been hiding, and it's always going to be a smoke, and it's going to stink, right?
Mm,
Because it's a smoke. And smoke smells when it's a smoke from a burning wood or whatever.
yeah.
And so if you let those out, the more you let it out, and the more at peace you are with your life, because now it's no longer being bottled inside of you. And when you bottle it inside of you, and this, I'm preaching to the choir, but you're short fused, and it truly shows up in how you react to people's certain behavior, and like yoga heals a lot, meditation heals a lot, yoga with oil and yoga with meditation, and all of them together, with your diffuser and all that,
Mhm.
it's just such a calm, you create a calm environment. It creates a calm mind, and it creates your world around you, because it always starts with you. So kudos to you for arriving to where you're at now. So tell me more.
Okay, hang on. I have to let my cat in because he's freaking out at my door.
Go for it.
He's out there scratching and crying.
I hear him. I heard him.
Did you hear him? I know. He's crazy. Hi, baby. Okay, you're all right. All right. So let's see. So I've been teaching for about a year and a half, and I'm also in my advanced yoga teacher training. So I'm going to be, I've been doing that, and that's like a 2-year training that I'm doing.
Wow.
And the style of yoga that I'm starting to teach is more like a yin restorative type of yoga, where you go deeper into your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of being in the pose for a longer time, and then having the oils. So what I do is I bring oils to a class, and I have like an intention or a theme with it. And I have the people put the first oil on, and we talk about the intention, and then I put them into a pose. And then I either give them space to think, or I give them like little nuggets to kind of chew on while they're in that pose. So just talking about whatever the emotional theme is that goes with the oils that I've brought. And it's just my favorite thing to do. It's my favorite way to connect with people, aside from music and dancing. That's my other favorite way to connect with people.
Yeah.
But the teaching yoga really, I thought that I wanted to teach like vinyasa, like flow, power, because that's what I was practicing at first. And then I had an injury in my arm while I was in my teacher training, and I realized that I needed to slow down. And then I realized that most of the world needs to slow down.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I teach a lot of slow down so you can speed up.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've got the yin and the yang, right? So we live in the yang all the time. We're going, we're striving, we're doing, we're becoming. And a lot of people don't take time to live in the yin side, where we're slowing down, we're listening, we're breathing, we're operating from a different, part of our consciousness, kind of getting into that parasympathetic nervous system, and allowing our nervous system to rebalance, so that we can do all the yang stuff that we need to do, all the striving and the doing and the becoming, So it's really a balance between those two things. And so my classes are really like a safe container for people to come and be open and be held. That's what I really like to bring to people, is that sense of
cool.
to be held. Yeah.
So where do you teach, or first of all, where do you get these yoga teacher certification? Is it online? Is it a face-to-face class?
Yeah, it's face-to-face. So I live in the northern panhandle of Idaho, and I'm right on the border of Washington, basically.
Okay, you're close to Spokane.
Yep, Spokane's like my second home. And so I took my teacher training at the Mellow Monkey, which is a yoga studio in Spokane.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took my initial teacher training there, my 200-hour training, and now I'm in my 300-hour training at the same studio. And I also teach at that studio. And then I teach at a studio here in Idaho called Hayden Yoga and Massage. And I just got promoted at that studio to yoga manager. Like, this is a brand new promotion that just happened for me.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Like, yeah, I really, I think that my long-term vision is to have a space where there can be a collective of a bunch of different teachers and healers, so that we can come together and offer all of the things that we do as our specialties, and bring them to people who are ready to bring that into their awareness,
Yeah.
But the fact is that the town that I live in, Coeur d'Alene, is very different from Spokane, even though we're very close. Coeur d'Alene's really conservative. It's a big lake resort town. So the winter time is all the locals. The summertime is all the tourists.
Yep.
It's a very interesting place. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to visit here. We're close.
I have not, but I want to go to your water park that's close there.
Yeah.
my kids.
Silverwood. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I know Julian Huff and her husband lives there.
Yeah. You should come up here. It's so the lake is gorgeous.
I heard. Yeah, we should
There's so
come.
much to do. Maybe
It's not
next
very
summer.
far from Portland
No,
either.
it's
So
not. I have friends in Portland. It's like it's a six and a half hour drive.
it's
You know,
nothing.
it's
Yeah.
it's really nothing. And so I jump over to Portland from time to time and go hang
Yeah.
out. And
Well, you let
sometimes,
me know when you come for
oh,
sure.
I will
We'll
absolutely, because
hang
I would
out
love to connect with you in person. That would be
for
amazing.
sure. Do you, so there's a lot of yoga teachers that travels across the globe now and teach
Yeah.
yoga. That's something that's super exciting, I think, in the yoga world.
Hmm.
And the other exciting piece is some teachers teach online now. So
Yes.
there's
That's
like,
another, yeah. So I
yeah,
have all these different, like, I'm a dreamer. I live in the headspace.
me
That's,
too.
that's kind of some of a little, it could be a problem. It tends to sometimes
I
manifest as a
know.
problem. But I'm an air sign, and so I'm all up in the head. So I have all these big dreams, and one of them is to either teach online so that I can reach a lot of people,
Hmm.
or teach, be a traveling teacher when my youngest son has graduated from high school.
Hmm.
So the way I like to think of it is that right now I'm still here to be a mom, and I'm
Hmm.
always going to be a mom, but I have a young one, he's 11
Forever.
years old. And so with the time that I have between now and the time he graduates from high school is the time that I can build community where I live, and maybe even build community online, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And then when he's graduated, then I can branch out and start to travel. So that's kind of what I see in my future, is that type of thing.
Yeah. That's exciting. What are
Yeah.
your kids' names?
My youngest name is Aiden, and my older son, oh, hello, Kitty. My older son is named Dylan, and my daughter is named Jada.
Oh, I love their names. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Now, your mom is still in New Mexico or
She is.
Albuquerque?
Yep,
Is
my
that?
mom's still in Albuquerque, and she did eventually get married. She met somebody when I was in high school, and they've been together since. And he's been
Oh,
such a good partner for her.
good.
They're retired. They are into like jeeping. They do jeep. They go on jeep trails, and they have like all these friends, and they're in all these jeep clubs. And so they're
That's
in Moab right
cool.
now, like jeeping.
Oh, yeah,
It's
that's a
awesome.
beautiful place for that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's so cool. What's your message to your mom if she was to listen?
Mm. I think if my mom was to be listening, my message would be thank you. Thank you for putting up with all my crap when I was a teenager. And then also thank you for the strength that she placed into me without even knowing or realizing she was doing it.
Hmm.
But because of the adversity that I had in my life growing up, it turned me into a really like rock solid, strong person. And there's never a shortage of strength. I don't have a shortage of strength.
That's so
And so
cool.
I think that she gave me that.
That's so awesome. What is it that you learned from your mom's parenting that you are continually using for your own parenting with your children?
I learned the power of affection,
Mm,
because there wasn't affection. My mom was not, and is still not, and she's just not an affectionate person. But I'm a very affectionate person with my kids. I like
hmm.
to hug my kids. I like to sit next to them. I like to put my arms around them. I like to be with
Me
them,
too. Hmm.
And so I learned all the opposite things.
Know what not to do and what to do.
Yeah, the what not to do's. And my mom even told me once, she said that she thinks that I'm a better mom than she was.
Oh,
And
that's
and she, that takes a lot of like courage to say that too. But she said that to me, and that was a huge compliment. That was such a
huge,
huge compliment to me. And I'm
huge.
not a perfect parent by any means,
No, no
I'm
one
doing the best
alive.
that I can with
Yeah,
the tools that I have. But I think that so long as I keep that in my consciousness and my awareness, that we're all doing the best that we can with what we've got, that's,
it's all we can do. And when we have really amazing people around us that can also help us
mm-hmm.
and not coming from our perspective, also not being afraid to ask for help is going to uplift our skill set as a parent too, and make us a better parent because we have help. So
absolutely.
that's so
And
cool.
I kind of briefly mentioned that my kids all have different dads, and my older son, he's my middle child. His dad's not in the picture, but my oldest, so my daughter, and my youngest son, both of their dads are in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have a lot of support and have had a lot of support in raising my kids. It wasn't just me. It was me. It was, my daughter's dad, my daughter's grandparents. Like as a unit, we raised her. And same with my youngest son. It's me, it's his dad, it's his parents that all raised my youngest son. So my middle son got the short end of the stick because of the dad that he has or doesn't have.
Yeah.
So that's, it's kind of a weird
And so
dynamic.
I can immediately understand why your son would be like that.
Yeah.
Yes. Because he probably feels like nobody wants him. And I know that you do, but who's in front? I mean, you've experienced it with your own mother, like the one that's so engaged and actively on the day-to-day in your life is the one you take for granted.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure deep down inside that he appreciates you, and he's probably going to as he gets mature in life. And that just comes with time. Sometimes when you're wounded throughout the process, especially when a young person, being wounded, it takes time to heal those kinds of wounds. So just be there for him, I think, is the best thing you can do.
Yeah. And that's where we're at, and he's 17 years old. He's, looking for his first job and doing things like that those types of things will help him to also build confidence, to be out there in the world, because he has learning disabilities that he struggles with. He's a high functioning autism. So he's got Asperger's. So that's been a challenge as a parent, and that's challenging for him as, the one living with that. So he's an interesting little firecracker, but he definitely is a reflection of me in a lot of ways. So I can relate to him a lot.
What is your message to Jada?
My message to Jada, God, she's so awesome. I love my daughter so much. I love how independent she is. And I think my message to her is probably just to continue to grow into her own power. Figuring out what that is for her and not letting anybody tell her how to be. So something about my daughter is that she has a girlfriend and not a boyfriend. And so she came out to me and her dad when she was a senior in high school. She met a girl, and I always knew. I just knew intuitively.
Moms just knew.
We did, right?
You just know.
And he did too, because we talked about it when she was very young. But so my message to her is just to stay strong in that, and that to not let anybody try to put her inside of a box.
She's human. She's just one of us.
Yeah.
So remind me your second son's name.
His name is Aiden.
Aiden is the baby. I know Aiden.
He's my baby.
What's the name of the middle one?
Dylan.
Dylan. What's your message to Dylan?
Oh, you know what? Same thing. Like, not to let anyone put him inside of a box, because I think what has happened throughout his life is that because he has Asperger's and he has ADHD, we've struggled a lot in the school system with
That's
people. It's right. They just classify him as a troublemaker, and then they put him inside of a box that says, you're a bad kid.
I hate when they do that, because school combines everybody. And then the ones that don't belong, they label them like the most negative thing.
Yep. And that's what's happened to him. We actually withdrew him from high school last week. He's going to pursue his GED, and because it's just too much, it's not working. He's angry at school, and it's going to end up bad for him if we keep him there. And so we've made a choice. We made a choice last week, and that was what we chose. So
good for you, Mama.
Yeah,
because they don't belong in that normal school system. And like what really is normal? Like sometimes you look at from their perspective for special child like yours, like maybe they are the normal ones and we're the ruined.
I know.
You know, like it's like we don't know which really is the truth, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we're the ones that are like, because we're trying, some people are just trying to belong and go with the flow, and they just like want to be different. I mean, it's just, I question that sometimes, like maybe we're the normal ones. And I mean, you know, we need help to understand these special people
Yep.
more.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand them because I've grown in my own little mind that, you know, I study a lot for my own personal growth. So I understand it. I love people. It's my passion. Like just people, different walks of life and also different personalities. I just love understanding where they truly come from, because what they are now is not who they currently are. It's because of who they have become throughout the process. And I love, that's why you hear in my podcast, I talk about the childhood a lot in my podcast, because I know that who I'm talking to right now has a lot to do with who they were as a child.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and what I would really love to see is yoga being taught in schools.
Yes.
Right? I think that if we can get to our kids when they're in elementary school and start teaching them mindfulness, and if we don't have to call it yoga, we can just call it mindfulness. We could call it awareness. We could call it whatever. And it doesn't even have to be moving the body around. It could just be mindful thinking.
Yeah.
I think that
we can call it a timeout or a detention. If they want to classify as that.
Well, you know what? I read some,
detention.
Yeah, I read some article where they do. There's some school that uses yoga in detention. So when the kids go to detention, they teach them yoga. That's brilliant. That's brilliant, you know. But
that's so cool, because I always say that when I have a ton of money, I want to provide the cafeteria's food is the most disgusting food in the whole entire world. And it's just can't, like a lot of their vegetables are canned vegetables, you know, green beans. It's just not cute, doesn't taste good. So like having the Vitamix in, I mean, there's some sort of a risk to that because obviously they're kids, but if we can just teach healthy drinks like that and not box juice and just even just a little bit of upgrade on their drinks can make a huge difference. Even if they still eat canned whatever.
Right.
But they just make a change in one of the things that they feed our kids, such as milk and juice. You know, I don't know if you like dairy. I don't really believe in the dairy. I mean, there's good dairy, obviously. You have to really have high quality dairy, but the things that they market in those grocery stores are not good dairies and all that good stuff. What's your message to Aiden?
My message to Aiden is, and this is something we work on, is to show compassion to people who are different from him. This is my message to all three of my kids, but this is something I really focus on with him because he's young. So I'm like, okay, I can start molding him how I, know, how I would had I known with my other two when they were little. So we talk a lot about compassion for people who are different from us. And so my message to him would just be to always see and celebrate the differences in people rather than judge.
Yes. Thank you for that. Mom, my last question. But before I go to my last question, I want to give you kudos. And I mean, I commend you for all that you have gone through in life and how you still end up showing up today. You show up in the most positive way. Your smile is contagious. It must be the yoga because it relaxes you. You don't look like you have a lot of stress, even though I know that we talk a lot about your challenges. But I think challenges and stress are so different. Like people always think, you have a lot of challenge, you must be stressed. No, your stress is your reaction to your challenge. It's not the same. So I commend you for healing yourself and still continuously, because we all do are a work in progress. Yeah, it's a fight every day.
It is.
So,
And I just do my yoga practice, and I have really great friends. My support system is amazing with my friends and my family from a distance, you know.
yeah,
I just try to do things that feed my soul and that
exactly.
keep me in a space of authenticity at all times.
Yes, and I'm honored to be able to pull the curtains behind and get to know you a lot more than just being friends or connecting on Instagram. So it's definitely going to elevate our relationship because now we have so much, um, so much communication, so much connection, really. And it's amazing what technology can do nowadays. The connection there's no lack of connection if you're willing to put yourself out there. So I appreciate you, Renee. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I just want to, invite listeners to, if they want to get to know me a little bit more and kind of follow me,
Please,
um,
yes.
I have a podcast called Be Serve Rock. It's new. I'm playing around with it. I've got like 6 episodes out there,
I love
and
it.
it was inspired by a mantra. The mantra is Be Serve Rock. So it means to be your best self, serve the greater good, and rock out wherever you go. And I mentioned very briefly that dancing and music is very much a part of my journey. Um, I follow Michael Franti. Do you listen to Michael Franti's
No,
music?
I don't.
Okay, so now
Actually,
your assignment is to look up Michael Franti, and I'll message it to you,
please.
and listen to his music because he is a humanitarian and a singer-songwriter, and his mantra with his wife is Be Serve Rock. And so I kind of
That's so
adopted that and I
cool.
turned it into a podcast. And so I want to start interviewing people that I see who are embodying that message, that being their best selves, finding opportunities to serve humanity in any way, shape, or form. And then people who are rocking out and really just like rocking at life, and music lovers, especially because I'm a big music lover. I love reggae music. That's kind of my jam. But yeah, so follow my podcast, Be Serve Rock. And then I'm on Instagram as essential underscore flow underscore yoga, and on Facebook, Essential Flow Yoga.
So awesome. Now, do you have a website or
It's in
um
the works. It's in the works.
awesome.
It's like under construction. It's just ReneeHonrada.com. It's my name.
Perfect.
But when
Perfect.
it's going to be live June 8th is my launch date of my website. So then people can connect with me. My podcast will be linked in there, and then links to be able to work with me. Like I said, I want to start teaching online. I want to teach private yoga online to people. So if there's anyone out there who wants private yoga, I want to do that for people. So yeah.
That's so cool. Thank you for that. Appreciate you. Last question before we go. What
Oh,
is Renee Honrada's definition of the word mother hustler?
oh man. When I saw that being mother hustler, I was like, that's me. I'm a mother hustler,
Yes, I
right?
love when people say that. That's me because it's a community. It's of us that are out there.
Yes, you have done such a beautiful job of creating community.
Oh,
I
thank
can't
you.
even, like, I learned from you from listening to your podcast and listening to how you relate to people. It's my goal to create community with women who are domestic abuse survivors in my area and even online, like that's part of my bigger picture. So that being mother hustler really speaks to me because I had to mother hustle to get myself out of that marriage, right? Like that was,
You
and
did a good job,
and
girl.
I did a good job mother hustling my way out of that,
Yes.
and I've mother hustlered my way like just all throughout life. I feel like as
Uh-huh.
a parent, I've always been a good provider for my family. I've been in manager roles in every single retailer that I've worked for.
Wow.
I'm a worker, I'm a hard worker. I have 3 jobs, in fact, 4 jobs. I have 4 jobs right now.
You're a hustler.
I'm a mother hustler. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And, I love you so much for everything that you are and everything that you represent. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.